Well, good morning, and can I welcome everyone to this, the 9th meeting of the Public Audit Committee in 2026. The first agenda item is for members of the committee to agree whether or not to take agenda items 3, 4 and 5 in private this morning. Are we all agreed? Agreed. We are agreed. Thank you very much. And our principal agenda item is further consideration of the Auditor General's report on the NHS in Scotland finance and performance, which is an annual audit report produced each year. And we are very pleased to welcome, to give evidence on the report, the Accountable Officer for the National Health Service and the Director General for Health and Social Care, Caroline Lamb. Good morning. Alongside Caroline Lamb, we're pleased to welcome this morning Fiona Bennett, who's the Chief Financial Officer for the Health and Social Care Directorate in the Scottish Government. Good morning. And also we're pleased to welcome Christine McLaughlin, who is the Chief Operating Officer and Deputy Chief Executive of the NHS in Scotland. We've got quite a number of questions to put to you this morning based on the report. Before we get to those, though, Caroline, could I invite you to make a short opening statement?
Thank you very much, Convener. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here today to respond to questions on the Audit Scotland's NHS in Scotland 2025 report, as well as any further questions that you may have about the audits of NHS Ayrshire and Arran and NHS Grampian. We have, of course, given our full consideration to the recommendations in the NHS in Scotland report, and we were pleased to see that Audit Scotland noticed the progress made to our reform and renewal strategies with the publication of the Operational Performance Improvement Plan, the Population Health Framework and the Service Renewal Framework. The Operational Performance Improvement Plan has driven the progress that we've seen this year, with the latest statistics showing improvements in new outpatient, inpatient day case and diagnostic waiting lists and activity. Over the 12 months to January 2026, inpatient and day case activity was over 270,000, 5.6% more than the previous 12 months. Waiting lists continue to fall in Scotland, with waits over 52 weeks now reducing for 8 months in a row. Of course, whilst acknowledging those improvements, we know that there is a lot more work to be done. So we will continue to work with NHS boards to drive change and improvement as we work towards the aim of our guiding reform frameworks. And we are committed to publishing reports on delivery against the key actions in the Operational Performance Improvement Plan and against the actions set out within our reform frameworks. The Audit Scotland report is, of course, always an audit of a snapshot of time, and since its publication, time and work has moved on. As the committee will be aware, since the publication of the Audit Scotland report, the Scottish Government has passed a budget for 2026-27. That budget sees almost £22.5 billion investment in health and social care services, exceeding consequentials and providing a real terms uplift to enable more sustainable and resilient services. Over £17.6 billion for health boards provides a real terms uplift of 1.8%, with spending across the NHS rising by nearly £5 billion by the end of this Parliament. The £2.4 billion for primary care includes support for recruitment, retention and capacity building, providing over £98 million additional funding in 2026-27, with a further £36 million to establish new high street walk-in GP services, the first of which we're now seeing opening. We also note Audit Scotland's findings in its 2024-25 audit and subsequent Section 22 reports into NHS Ayrshire and Arran and NHS Grampian. Those boards both recently moved to Stage 4 of the NHS Scotland Support and Intervention Framework, which indicates that Scottish Government is providing an enhanced level of support and oversight to deliver a sustained improvement in those boards' financial position. As always, we will be very happy to answer the committee's questions on any of those audit reports. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And again, just for the record, could I ask if you accept both the findings and the recommendations of the Audit Scotland report?
Yes, and we will be working towards addressing the recommendations. Yes, Convener.
Thank you very much. Can I ask you about that item you touched on towards the end, which is about the support and intervention framework that you operate. And you are right to say that we had both NHS Grampian and NHS Ayrshire and Arran before us because they were both the subject of a Section 22 report, which is produced when things are not going terribly well. One of the things that really stood out to us was that if you take, for example, Ayrshire and Arran, I think it's been in deficit for 7 years. It's been at a high level of escalation for a long time. I mean, I think our working assumption would be if a board is escalated, it's in order for it to be turned around and de-escalated. And some of us have got experience with boards where that has happened, Forth Valley, for example. Why is it the case that with Ayrshire and Arran, it's been allowed to sit at a high level of escalation for as long as 7 years?
So NHS Ayrshire and Arran has been in escalation at level 3 for, as you rightly say, convener, for a number of years. And that has meant that Scottish Government have been supporting the board. So we have, I think, there was commentary and questions about the input from Viridian Associates. It's just as one example of the way in which Scottish Government have been supporting that board. The increased level of escalation reflects the fact that, despite those efforts, we haven't seen the improvement that we would expect to see around the financial performance of Ayrshire and Arran, and therefore the stage 4 escalation actually moves Ayrshire and Arran to that level where we will be continuing to provide extra support, but we're also putting in place the oversight arrangements, the assurance board arrangements. And I think you heard from NHS Grampian about how helpful they have found those assurance and oversight arrangements. So we are looking to see the same improvement delivered through a combination of that support. We have a new interim director of finance coming in, and we are also put in place the oversight and assurance processes.
But what is the point of a support and intervention framework and the Scottish Government supporting and intervening with a health board if it makes no difference to its performance or to its financial position? I mean, isn't the purpose of escalation to bring about an improvement in performance and financial management?
Yes, of course, the purpose of the support and intervention framework is to support boards to improve.
But it hasn't happened in this case, has it?
So it hasn't happened in this case, and that's why it's been escalated to a further level. We do see boards, we have a number of boards who are escalated, and we monitor those, and we do see boards, as you've noted, moving up and down the escalation framework. Our aim is always to see boards moving down. Ayrshire and Arran, we weren't seeing that movement at a level 3, and therefore they've been escalated to a level 4.
But that's come after a considerable period of time where there have been an escalated level that has not led to any change in performance.
Yes, and that hasn't been without us providing additional support in order to try and see that additional support. And I think we recognise that the issues in Ayrshire and Arran are long-standing, and some of them are around needing to look at redesign of services, looking at how they provide their services differently, and the level of support that we're now providing will enable them to get into those sort of considerations. And I think you heard from Gordon just last week about the work that they're taking forward in that respect, and the Scottish Government will be looking to support them with that. Yeah,
and we acknowledge that there has been a change in the leadership of the board. But to some extent, I think this leads me to one of the overall points which is made in the audit report, and it was articulated by the Auditor General when he gave evidence to us, where he said it's important for boards to be absolutely clear about what happens in different scenarios. Well, in the case of Ayrshire and Arran, clearly they haven't understood what's supposed to happen. They haven't been absolutely clear about what they're supposed to do when they're escalated.
So I don't think that's strictly the case. I think that Ayrshire and Arran have understood that they were escalated at a level 3 when the previous chief executive at Ayrshire and Arran announced that she was moving on from the board. I had a conversation with the the outgoing chief executive and the chair at that point about their level of escalation. And within Scottish Government, we have our national performance oversight group that keeps an eye on all issues across NHS boards. So I think Ayrshire and Arran have been pretty clear about their need to manage their financial balance. Having a new leadership in terms of Gordon James going into that board, I think has been a positive move. And what we're doing, what we've done with the level 4 escalation is to ensure that Gordon can be supported. And I think that's why Gordon was welcoming that level of escalation. Gordon can be supported to make the changes that need to happen in Ayrshire and Arran to get them back into financial balance.
Okay. Can I take you to the other side of this argument, which is that there are a number of health boards which have never gone into financial deficit, which have never needed to be escalated, which have maybe not met all the performance targets, but nonetheless have not found themselves requiring brokerage or financial bailouts or loans and so on. So what do you say to them?
So I think it is really clear that we have different challenges and different issues that need to be addressed across Scotland. And you're right, if you look at our escalation process, because our support and intervention framework obviously doesn't just respond to financial balance issues, it responds to other issues as well. So the challenges that NHS boards are facing will vary across the country and across periods of time. NHS Grampian is a point in case where actually it's only relatively recently that the financial challenges have developed in NHS Grampian, but they have been pretty swift to develop and have also been of an order of magnitude that has led to their level of escalation. But we accept absolutely that whilst we have boards that are struggling to balance, then that creates a pressure on the whole system. It means that we're not able to invest in ways that we would wish to, and that's why we are so focused through the Financial Delivery Unit and through other measures that we take on supporting boards, supporting those boards who are not in financial escalation so that they don't get into that position, as much as supporting boards who are really challenged by their financial position and seeking to help them to get out of that. If my colleagues want to come in, please do shout.
Just very briefly, just to that point, and it's why we've moved away from the old brokerage system to the deficit support funding system that we now have to make it a more equitable process. So all territorial boards get an NRAC share of sustainability funding, whereas before that didn't exist. Those boards that are above stage 2 in the framework will also get a share of deficit support funding, recognising the challenges that are faced within those boards. And a board like Ayrshire and Arran, we've seen an increase in that deficit support funding through the move to stage 4 to help them on that recovery journey. So it does make it more equitable than the old brokerage system that we had in place.
Okay, thanks. And other members of the committee are going to come in to ask more questions about that allocations formula and so on. I guess one of the things, and this is something that we've raised in evidence before, is if these health boards that were in financial deficit that regularly required brokerage were doing so because they were exceeding targets and they were outperforming other health boards and were going over and beyond in meeting the needs of their population, that would be one thing. But what we discover is not only are these health boards in financial difficulty, they are also underperforming targets and underperforming compared to comparative health board areas. I mean, what are your reflections on that?
So, excuse me, I would agree, Convener, and that's why if you look at NHS Grampian, the escalation there was not just around financial performance. It was very much around NHS Grampian being an outlier in relation to performance across a number of the areas, particularly unscheduled care in NHS Grampian. So the escalation process in NHS Grampian has involved support not just around that achieving financial balance, but also looking at how they can improve their performance against other metrics, particularly unscheduled care and indeed planned care.
But I suppose it begs the question, do you have to rely on an unannounced inspection by Healthcare Improvement Scotland to bring around these changes and to lead to these interventions and supports? Or shouldn't you have a better system of communication that lets you understand what's going on out there, that lets you know, for example, in a 4-bed ward that there are 6 beds regularly, or whatever the issues are, the issues that were at Dr. Gray's, for example, that came up in the NHS Grampian escalation.
Yes.
do you need to wait until there is a swoop by the healthcare improvement team to understand that things are not being conducted to a level that we would expect, and that there are indeed public health issues around how patients are being treated, for example?
So I'll come to Christine in a minute to give you a bit more detail on this, but just to be clear, we have within my directorate, we have a process through our National Performance Oversight Group that looks at bringing together data from around the performance of our NHS boards, looking at financial data, looking at performance data, looking at soft intelligence, and that includes intelligence that we're getting through, whether it be his reviews or whether it be the survey of doctors in training that NHS Education conducts. So we bring together all that information in order to think about where boards are and which are the boards that maybe need more support and need to be thought about against that support and intervention framework. Christine.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I guess the point you're making I would agree with is that often a system goes out of balance and that manifests itself through the financial position, but often doesn't start there. So through the group that Caroline mentioned that I chair, we bring together data and intelligence across the system, because I think it's probably also worth saying that in order to keep focus, we're looking at one system relative to another. And personally, I don't think that having everybody escalated to a heightened level helps us, because what we're trying to do is differentiate and decide where you need to put the support. Because these things, you mentioned Forth Valley, it's very intensive for everybody doing that. And you want to intervene on the basis that you think that it will lead to an improvement. So I think we do look across the whole system to get that balance. The work of Healthcare Improvement Scotland is a really important component of that, and we've got now very specific escalations in relation to mental health, maternity as well. So it's part of the picture. You're right that sometimes there will be an inspection that leads you to go faster in some things because you've got evidence in front of you that merits action. But what you really want is to be able to get that sense of what's ahead of you and think about the work that we need to do. But we can also use that to take steps before escalating, and that's where I think it's really important for us to look to go now. How do you see those signs and look at how you can learn from what the work in Forth Valley, the work in Grampian, so that you can take steps before escalation, because it is designed to be a supportive process, but it's a very intensive process. And I think that there's probably more that we can do to look at how we can learn from other systems and take steps before reaching the point of escalation, certainly before reaching a level 4 escalation.
Yeah, which kind of leads me on to my final question for this part of the discussion, which is about governance arrangements, because it's not just about you from the centre stepping in and escalating and giving extra resource in terms of consultants or other people from other health boards going in to work with that health board. It's also about the territorial arrangements at board level, isn't it? I mean, do you think that, and either Christine or Caroline, do you think that there is sufficient support, training, understanding at the level of territorial health boards about what their role is to oversee the financial management of the health board, to make sure that the health board's performing to the level that we would expect, to make sure it's not breaking the kind of rules that Healthcare Improvement Scotland would come down hard on? Do you think that system's working very well?
So we have, you're absolutely right, Convener, that the responsibility is with territorial boards, and particularly with that relationship between the non-executives and the executive team, with the non-executives getting the right information to be able to hold their executive teams to account. And that's a really important part of our system. Even at a level 4 escalation, it is still the board who is responsible for delivering the improvements that we expect to see. And in order to support that, as you'll be aware, we've got the Blueprint for Good Governance. That's in its 2nd edition. Boards have relatively recently been through a process of self-assessment against that. They've all got their action plans that they're delivering. They're supported by a team in NHS Education in Scotland, but which acts as a sort of critical friend and looks across the range of self-assessment results coming back from boards so that we're able to identify where there are themes coming through, where boards can learn from each other. So we do provide a number of supportive mechanisms to boards. We also, I think, are really focused in terms of our recruitment, particularly to the post of chairs of NHS boards, but also to non-exec members, about being really clear about those roles and responsibilities, ensuring that board members take up training in relation to their roles as well. So yes, you're right. That is a really important part of our structures. We do provide a lot of support to boards to help them to discharge that. But it is also something that we monitor as well in terms of through our performance management arrangements. Again, some of that soft intelligence about how board meetings are functioning.
Yeah, I think there's also really good evidence of a level of collaboration across the boards that I've seen really grow over the last year or so, where there is a kind of peer support network. I think that doesn't just happen at chief executive level, chair level, but also in the professional groups. So, for example, in those most recent escalations, I think both Gordon and Laura could speak about the extent to which they've sought and received support from other boards, either for them in the roles, but also quite a lot of examples of mutual aid where boards are supporting much more. So, there's a, I suppose, there's the difference between a kind of competitive environment and a supportive one. I see it moving much more towards a supportive network, which is something I think we definitely want to see more of.
Just finally, before I finish, you mentioned evidence. Do you have evidence to support claims that new board members are being trained and the existing board members are being offered refresher training? Do you collect data on that?
So I think that would be part of the assessment against the blueprints, but I will come back to you, convener, as to whether we've got any data. One of the things I maybe should add is that the board chairs have a process now of appointing a buddy to each new chair who's appointed. So a brand new chair will be buddied up with a more experienced chair so that they have a definite point of contact to go to. And actually it's a bit more proactive than that they will meet regularly just to ensure that the new chair is being supported into their role.
OK, good. Thank you very much. I'm now going to invite Colin Beattie to put some questions to you. Colin.
Thank you, Convener. At our meeting of the 7th January, the Auditor General highlighted the fact that we're entering a cycle now where PFI contracts are starting to fall due. Now, obviously, they're very complex. I've actually read through one of the contracts for the ERI, and the options, the financial options that are woven into that at the end of the contract are quite complex as to what the outcomes might be and what the best option actually is to take. And it would appear that's, from what the Auditor General says, that it's not unusual for each PFI contract to have many different terms at the end of as to how the handover takes place and so on. There's no template. And it's a bit surprising that they're not more similar, but clearly they were all negotiated individually. What financial risks arise from PFI contracts that are now reaching maturity, and how are the boards actually preparing for the potential handover costs and the long-term liabilities that might go with that?
Okay, I'm going to turn to Fiona on this one. We have obviously been making sure that there is a lot of support around boards who are in that position, both in terms of understanding what those options are, but also looking at, because we need to very clearly understand what the financial impacts are of those choices going forward as well.
Yeah, so we have 7 PFI contracts expiring between now and 2030, so we very much do that horizon scanning to understand what's coming up in terms of end of contract. We've got the Royal Infirmary Edinburgh in 2027 and Universal Hospital of Wishaw in 28. So we work very closely with Scottish Futures Trust and NHS Assure in terms of that expertise, both from a finance, a legal and estates. It has to be quite a holistic approach to the end of these contracts to understand what the best options are. But we absolutely build that into our sort of medium to long-term financial planning in terms of both the cost and opportunity of those contracts ending to understand what the future service model needs to look like.
So the actual local boards are not involved in that? Primarily?
Absolutely they are, yes. So they will directly work with Scottish Futures Trust and NHS Assure, as well as our team having a part of that overall conversation so as we can give that national oversight, but it's the local board that will have the expertise of that contract.
Do the local boards have that expertise? I mean, reading through the contracts and the options that, and I'm basing this on one contract, by the way, I've actually read, the options there are complicated and the outcomes a bit uncertain, actually, in the back of an envelope. How are the boards getting the skills that you say they have in order to take this through? You've talked about the Scottish Futures Trust, of course, but there's incredibly difficult legal parts in that as well.
There is, yes. So some of that expertise will come within the board, but as you see, each contract is quite unique and it's not a regular process. So it's not going to be that there's people that do this sort of day in, day out within a board area, because it will happen every so often. So as I said, there's those couple of organisations, NHS Assure, Scottish Futures Trust, that will provide some of that support. But where there's a particularly complex contract, we will also seek further external support where needed. For example, in the Royal Infirmary Edinburgh, Deloitte have been providing some expertise in that, who will look at these things on a UK and global basis and bring some of their expertise. So we'll absolutely supplement local expertise within the public sector, but also within the private sector where it's needed.
Looking at what these PFI contracts entail, obviously it's the management of the estate, which is quite a complex business. There must be fairly few companies that can actually take that on, unless the NHS takes it in-house, which is an administrative issue for the NHS. How are they approaching this?
So those options will be looked at in terms of what is optimal. Is there the right sort of company that could provide that service, or is it something we need to look at in-house? But that would happen months, if not years, before the end of a contract to ensure that we've done that forward planning and options appraisal from a value for money perspective, as well as ensuring continuity of service. Well,
if we've done all that years in advance at the end of a contract, there should be some of them already have been decided.
And yes, absolutely, and they're all at various different stages of that. As I say, there's the couple we know are ending in 27 and then 28 for Wishaw, so they are already starting to go through that process, looking at those options, and as I say, they're at different stages based on the individual contracts.
I suppose my concern is that having looked at these different options, one of them taking the management back in-house, I would guess, there are so few companies out there that we end up by default simply in another name continuing the existing arrangement.
And again, that will form part of that consideration, but it is vital that we have to make decisions both based on values for money as well as ensuring the service can continue to be delivered in the hospital without affecting the safety and quality of services for patients. So it has to be about that value for money contractual piece, but also the reality of the service.
Are you satisfied that we have got a grip of this? Because the downside potential is huge given the size of these contracts.
It is extremely complicated, yes, but I am confident that the boards that are coming to the ends of their contracts have got appropriate support, and where they don't feel they have, they would come to us to request that further support.
Okay, that's good to hear. There's also an issue with the estate about maintenance issues, backlog maintenance issues, which here's, I've got a figure of 1.3 billion, which is an awful lot of money. 59 million of that is high risk in one way or another. What actions are being taken to address these high risk maintenance issues that pose a direct risk to patient safety or operational continuity?
again, Fiona can talk you through the work that we've done with boards around their business continuity planning and the extent to which we've funded those outcomes.
Yeah, so a key step we've taken is to start the business continuity process so as we can see those high-risk areas across the country rather than boards sort of individually having to bid in, if you like, for that support. They'll let us know what areas need the most urgent support, and we've sort of brag rated those to understand, as you say, those really high-risk areas, and we have funded 100% of those that are in that red area for 25-26. In terms of business continuity, I think as well it's important to note as we move into the more whole system working from an infrastructure and capital perspective through subnational planning as well, that it's important we do review our estate to understand where it might be appropriate to rationalise our estate, think about our older properties and whether they're still fit for purpose, and making sure that we're sharing our estate across the public sector as much as possible. But the business continuity plan is focused on that backlog maintenance, sort of high risk areas, and I say we have fully funded the RED projects within that.
So the high-risk areas, you say, are 100% covered. Does that relate to the 59 million, or is it a different figure?
It's the same figure, yeah, it's
that
the same
figure.
Part of it. Yes.
So that has been 100% covered?
Yes, we've invested 100 million into the business continuity plan in 25-26.
Okay, thank you. Delayed discharges, waiting times, I mean, it's an ongoing issue. How are delayed discharge and the wider system flow pressures being addressed to support reductions in waiting times and reduce pressure on acute care?
Yeah, so you'll be aware that the Audit Scotland also published a report on delayed discharges, and Derek Grieve and I were here talking about that a few weeks ago. And there is no doubt that the level of delays in our hospitals is a huge issue for the individuals who are delayed, because we know all the evidence about how much people decondition and deteriorate. It is not good for people to be in an environment that is not their own home or a homely environment when they are clinically fit to be discharged. But also it's occupying a significant number of beds that otherwise would be available to improve our flow through hospitals and indeed improve our ability to provide planned care in a more timely basis. So, significant issue for all of us. How are we addressing that? So a number of ways, and I'll maybe come to Christine to say a bit more, but we've been looking very much about, I suppose, about how you keep people out of hospital in the first place, whether that be through them, not being admitted, but having treatment provided in other ways. Also looking at how we discharge as early as possible. And let's bear in mind that 97% of discharges are not delayed, but actually, even of those 97% of discharges that are not delayed, if we can get those out of our hospitals early in the morning, that helps to relieve flow through the rest of the day. So there are marginal gains that can be made at every step of this process. We're working with the Discharge Without Delay Collaborative, looking at a number of measures around earlier in the day discharges, around reducing the length of stay, and working through all of that. And each one of our NHS boards is obviously engaged with their partners, so local government and IJBs. And I remind the committee again that local government have the statutory responsibility for social care, and having the ability to access social care is absolutely key to reducing the number of delays. So there's a huge amount of work going on across the piece in every area, overseen by the Collaborative Response and Assurance Group, which is jointly chaired by the Cabinet Secretary and Councillor Kelly from COSLA. Christine, do you want to say a bit more about the NHS actions?
Yeah, if I can, let me know if I'm on the right track of what you're looking for. But if you step back from it all, because often we focus on individual components of the system, I think what I'm really focused on is in two things. One is being able to plan for the level of capacity we need for planned care to meet demand across the system, so that we can. The first target is to be in balance in that, and then to be able to see that backlog consistently come down. And then the other component, and they are both linked very clearly, is how we manage flow through the whole system. And Caroline gave some examples of that. But I think sometimes just focusing on one part of that, whether it's delayed discharges or admissions in through emergency departments doesn't get us the sense of how do we keep the whole system in balance. And so the work that we're doing on flow is really designed to be able to understand the coherence of all of those components, as you say, keeping people out of hospital in the first place, making sure that once they're in, they're treated on time. If people are being admitted, that there is a flow through the system that allows them to go to the right place, and then doing the work in advance of discharge so that they can be discharged. And I think that it's the way in which we're going to get the significant improvement in that is being able to focus on the totality of that and having a more consistent approach to learning about the things that are really making the difference across the country. Because I could speak for the rest of the session on good examples in parts of the country. What we've got to do, I think the role of government in particular, is to make sure that we understand the things that are actually making the difference, and we can see it through outcomes and have those things consistently applied across the country. I don't say that as if it's an easy thing to do, but I think that that's the way that we've got to be able to approach this, so that we're going to get to see sustained improvement within financial balance, as we talked about earlier, across the system. But there are enough really good examples out there for us to be able to understand what good does look like and the things that we need to do to be able to move towards it. And to answer your question, that's really what we've got to be able to do in set our sights and understanding what a system that works in balance in both unscheduled care and planned care looks like in the future, the extent to which we've got that in place, and where we need to invest more than we do at the moment in those areas.
I guess from my perspective, looking in, the big issue seems to be the availability of care in the community that you can discharge into. You can improve efficiencies and so on within the NHS, but that's still the fundamental problem. The councils seem to have, and certainly in my area, seem to have every year a big deficit on their social care side, and running into millions every year over budget. And yet the availability of social care is very restricted, and they have difficulty recruiting people even when the money's there into that service. You obviously are working with local authorities and so on this. Do you get a feel that it's improving? Do you get a feel that we're heading in the right direction on it?
I think that one of the challenges here is that the picture is very mixed across Scotland. So there is a lot of variability between the local authority and IJB areas with the lowest number of delays per 1,000 population and those with the highest. So there is a really significant spread. And the challenge, as Christine says, we can point to good examples across the country, but ensuring that those examples get picked up, implemented. And we know that there are challenges because local circumstances are different and you can't always just lift and shift one way of working to another bit of the country. But there are some really good examples, and we have seen where systems have come together, so NHS, IJBs, local government, to really focus on this. We can see shifts happen, but it does require constant attention. And your point about the workforce is well made as well. So we also know that there are challenges in recruiting to social care posts. And those challenges, again, are not consistently spread across Scotland. So we see far more of a challenge in remote and rural areas, and that's linked sometimes to housing and the availability of housing as well. But also we know that there are things that we need to do to address some of the challenges around levels of pay and other terms and conditions in the social care sector, which it's not a single homogenous employer in the same way as the NHS are. So terms and conditions vary quite significantly across different employers, and that again is a challenge. And the final thing I just say in relation to workforce, and Christine might want to say a bit more about where we see areas of improvement. But the whole issue around international recruitment has been a real challenge for the social care sector, and the constraints on international recruitment has and continues to have an impact, and that's why we put £500,000, I think, into supporting folk who already have a visa and are able to work in the UK, but finding it more difficult to get jobs in other parts of the UK.
I think, I mean, there is no doubt that there are pressures in the system in relation to social care capacity. As you say, as there are pressures in some areas on acute beds within hospital environments as well. But I think of you examples recently. I was out just talking to the team in Forth Valley, and what was really clear there, which was great to see after a board that had been in escalation, was the really constructive, close working relationship between the local authorities, the health and social care partnerships with the Forth Valley Chief Executive and senior team, and looking to find joint solutions to these problems. And I think that's where you see the best progress, is where there are good working relationships and everyone can see that contributing something into that problem will help to find a way through. So I think we're trying to avoid these things being siloed and kind of blaming each other for those issues, but looking at where the main pressures are and how they can best support. But certainly some really good examples in Falkirk area, for instance, that is one of those examples that we do want to try and take across the rest of the country. But there's just no one thing, I think, is a really simple answer to that.
Clearly there's more work needing done on that one. I'd like to move on to emergency and unscheduled care, which, again, on our session of 7th January, the Auditor General said that the presenting symptom is that hospitals are unable to receive ambulances and people are not being handed over within 15 minutes. If ambulances are hovering for about an hour, it's because there's a backlog. Now, there's been talk about some progress getting made on that, and I wondered what actions are underway to address backlogs in the system that result in ambulances being delayed in their turnarounds.
Yeah, Christine.
So you're right. But again, if you look, there are particular sites. So some sites will have no ambulances queuing, and other sites will have multiple ambulances queuing. So if you just try and fix the ambulance bit, the answer isn't to build a larger area for ambulances to wait, is to get that flow within the system. So if you look at Edinburgh Royal Infirmary, for instance, one of the sites that used to have one of the highest numbers of delays with ambulance crews waiting, and what they've put in place goes right back to making sure that they've got a really fast turnaround within their acute receiving ward, to be able to avoid that backlog that goes all the way through to ambulances having to stack. But there are also really basic things that, and we've invested about £1 million over winter in the service to have hospital ambulance liaison officers. It's a very practical thing to do to make sure that that issue that you talked about doesn't build up, so that there is coordination between teams to be able to allow ambulances to bring the patients into the emergency department and be able to get back on the road. So it's about £1 million where we've got targeted liaison officers in the sites that have those largest numbers of ambulances waiting. But helping to have fewer ambulances waiting is really about making sure that the emergency department is flowing the way that it should do. And what staff tell you on the ground is that starts really early in the morning. So if you have a real build up in the morning, it's really hard to recover that through the day. So making sure that you've got fewer people from the day before in that hospital setting is all part of just how you get a better flowing system. So we've got work, the Centre for Sustainable Delivery, that is leads on a lot of our improvement work in unscheduled care, have a number of components of work that's underway across all systems to be able to get that improvement and learning across all of our key sites, and that is really starting to see some significant improvement. We saw improvement this winter, for example, because of that.
I think the other thing to add to that is that the other bit in this is trying to make sure that we have got systems that ensure that the ambulances only have to convey people to our hospitals when that's absolutely essential for the person. So through flow navigation centres and ambulance crews being able to speak to senior clinicians the ambulance service are moving to over 50% not having of their calls not being conveyed into hospital. So all of these things help, but as Christine says, there is always more work to be done as well.
So a big part of that, for instance, is the focus of the ambulance service in trying to treat people in their own homes rather than having them conveyed to hospital, as Caroline said. So we're seeing improvement in that area. So we're seeing overall fewer people actually being conveyed to hospital, but it is part of that there have to be options and alternatives for people that can avoid that, so that only the people who really need to be in hospital are conveyed to hospital. So it is a big component of the work that we need to do.
Now, as part of that, Audit Scotland spoke to us about planned improvements, such as frailty units and alternative pathways, but Audit Scotland also stated that these have been rolled out too slowly to ease the pressure. So what progress has actually been made on these planned improvements, such as the frailty units and the alternative pathways?
Yeah, so again, Christine might want to add some more of the detail, but we have been very focused across the system. This is all about that, trying to ensure that people who don't need to be in hospital are not in hospital. So whether that's through the hospital at home, which is sort of the top-end system, or virtual wards where people's health conditions are being monitored, or frailty units, which provide an option for our more frail and elderly people to be kept out of A&E, to be managed in an environment where there is really good communications with the support networks and the social care support and other supports in the communities, and get them home as soon as possible. And all the evidence shows that we are reducing the length of stay for those frail and elderly people through the use of frailty units. I think they're now operational in all our acute hospital sites.
Yeah, all
mainland,
mainland territorial boards, emergency departments have a frailty service in place. Partly the improvement that we're seeking to see is to make sure that there's a standard for those frailty services that is achieved in all areas, that it's a 7-day service, for example. So having it in place isn't enough. You can tick the box to say we've got one. What we really need to do is have them all operating at the highest level that they can. So that's the work that we've got in place. But we are on track to meet the commitment on frailty services by the end of the year.
Just clarify my understanding there. You said that there's a frailty unit in each area.
In all mainland territorial boards have a frailty service. So
but not,
we said by the end
not
of
in each A&E, of course.
So I guess there is a defined thing that is a frailty unit. So some sites will have an actual a component within the emergency department for frailty. For others, it's a service with designated staff that will work within it. But the benefit of a frailty service is multidisciplinary team dealing with those patients to make sure that they get the best care and really targeted. So it's about the service is the key thing, I would say. But we do have a frailty service within all of our mainland territorial boards.
Thank you. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to the Deputy Convener, but before I do that, Joe Fitzpatrick wanted to come in on one of the areas that Colin had covered.
Just a very quick supplementary around Colin Beattie's questions around PFI. Obviously, these contracts, the government has moved away from PFI contracts, and some of these contracts are quite historic, quite legacy. The Wishaw Hospital that we talked about actually predates this Parliament, and we're still every year paying. Do we have a handle on how much the NHS is having to pay for PFI, PPP contracts every year?
So yes, we do collect the sort of data that each board spends on PFI contracts. It's quite commercially sensitive, I suppose, in some cases around negotiations, particularly coming towards the end of the contract. But yes, absolutely, we do understand and work with boards in terms of their value for money and spend.
Are we able to get a ballpark what that figure is overall?
I could provide that in writing.
Okay, that would be helpful, because I think it's a significant amount of what the NHS has to spend. And I think Colin Beattie's questions showed just how badly written some of these contracts were in terms of value for money for our NHS, but historic and predating this Parliament. So, thanks, Convener.
Okay, thank you. And we may return to PFIs at some point later on. But Jamie Green's got some questions for you. Deputy Convener, Jamie.
Just waiting on my mic. Thank you very much. Good morning. I want to take us back to the bigger picture and really what the premise of the Audit Scotland report was about. And I'll maybe draw your attention to page 3, which is the key messages, which I think really sums up where we're at. And these aren't trick questions. I genuinely want to try and get underneath the skin of some of this. Key message number 1, the sentence that jumps out at me the most is the second sentence, which says, even with increased funding, the NHS in Scotland is not in a financially sustainable position. Now, surely that must be a point of concern, given that you've said you accept the content of the report and indeed its recommendations. What, in your view, is the reason that the NHS is not in a financially sustainable position?
So I think you're absolutely right. Of course, there's a point of concern. I'm accountable officer for the portfolio. That said, I do welcome the fact that Audit Scotland recognised that boards have achieved unprecedented level of savings. However, there remains that challenge around sustainability. And as we've already noted earlier in the conversation, this is not a position across all boards. So we have a number of boards who find it, who manage to break even, and a number of boards who are really struggling to get to that position as well. So overall, I think the underlying issues around that are around demographics. So demographics in terms of an ageing population, more people living with multiple conditions, and everything that goes alongside that. Alongside that, we've also got significant growth in the medicines bill, and we have new medicines being developed every year, which is great, but they all come at a cost. I would also say that I think that some of the things we need to do, and that's where we're focused on our service renewal framework and our reform propositions, are in order to, first of all, through the population health framework, we need to support people to live longer, healthier lives, because that is good for them, but it is also good for the financial sustainability of the health service. And also through the service renewal framework, we need to look at how we can redesign services in order to achieve that financial sustainability. So there are lots of things that we're doing in the short term. So you'll have heard about the 15-box grid that we use to support boards to identify areas where we expect them all to be making improvements. And it's through the work of the Finance Delivery Unit focused on that grid that I think we have supported boards to deliver those unprecedented level of savings. However, more fundamentally, I think in order to get to financial sustainability, we need to look at how we better spend the money that we have. And some of that is back to the conversation that we've just been having around delayed discharges. And you will be aware that Audit Scotland pinpointed 440 million as being the cost of those delays. And that we need to find ways in which we can support people where they need to be supported, which is not in hospital, which is the most expensive end of where they're supported. I think there's also lots that we need to do, and Christine will be able to talk about the work that we've been doing around improving the collaboration across health boards. So we're making best use of our resources in relation to planned care. And we also need to really think about digital and innovation. So digital and innovation and how we leverage those opportunities to support population health, but also to support an improvement and more efficiency in the way in which we deliver services. I can talk about business systems and the subnational planning as well, but I'm sure we'll come on to that in other questions.
Thank you. That was a comprehensive answer. I appreciate it. But it's interesting. I'm glad you mentioned some of the improvement plans that you have in place. There's the Operational Improvement Plan, the Health and Social Care Service Renewal Framework, and the Population Health Framework. Lots of jargony stuff there. But the point is, if you jump down to point 3 of the key messages, and I'm glad you preempted my next question, is the Audit Scotland identified that these issues are long-standing, many of which are yet to be delivered. But the key point here is this persistent implementation gap between the policy ambitions and the delivery on the ground. That seems to be the sticking point. So you can have all the frameworks and plans in the world, but with great ambition and that we share. But if the delivery on the ground is not matching the ambition, then we have a problem, as identified in the key messages.
Yeah. So maybe if I can respond to that. So I think we would accept that the ambition and the actions that are set out in both our population health framework and the service renewal framework are not revolutionary. They're very much around areas of activity that like shifting the balance of care, which the Audit Scotland particularly alighted on. I think what we have now is we have increased tools to be able to do that. So you've heard a little bit about virtual wards and hospital at home, and some of those services rely on technology that probably wasn't available 10 years ago when people first started talking about shifting the balance. However, I would accept that there is a job of work for us to do to demonstrate that these frameworks are not just documents, but they are very much about how we shift the way in which we are delivering services. And I think we can point to some early examples of success in those areas. So I would point particularly, I'll maybe ask Christine to say a little bit more about what we've been doing through collaboration with boards in reducing the waits for planned care, and how that is developing now into our approach through subnational planning. We have also, and as confirmed with the recent budget, we are increasing our investment in general practice, and that is absolutely focused on increasing workforce, so increasing capacity, and being able, therefore, to have a stronger, more robust primary care offer that will be able to take some of that additional shift. We've also got the GP walk-ins, and a lot of the things that we've already talked about today are absolutely about shifting activity away from our acute hospital setting and into the community, whether that be about ambulance paramedics treating people in their own homes, or whether it's hospital at home, whether it's virtual wards. And then, of course, there's the digital developments and the digital front door now, the My Care app for Scotland. So I do think there are things that we can point to, and I've probably focused on that shift because that's the one that the Auditor Scotland particularly highlighted. But actually there are other things that we have been working very hard on delivering. So within the service renewal framework, we also announced the establishment of what was then known as NHS Delivery. It's now Public Services Delivery Scotland, and that will come into being on the 1st of April. So that has been almost delivered. It will be in existence from the 1st of April. So I absolutely accept the criticism that we have struggled with implementation. I do believe that we've got a track record already. We do plan to publish, as I said in my opening statement, what we've achieved against that. And I think what we've done so far provides the foundations to build on and be able to accelerate that progress as well. Would it help to hear a little bit more?
Yeah, I would like to interrogate some of those operational areas where you are making changes, because I think some of them are quite visible in the health service and people are seeing a new way of being treated and dealt with. But before I do that, I do want to just cover off some of the financial issues first, because it is quite an important area. We've taken quite a lot of evidence on that, and obviously we've heard from two boards who are in quite a perilous financial position. This issue of brokerage has come up quite a lot in our sessions, and the Auditor General spoke at great length about it when he gave evidence. I mean, there is a cumulative brokerage, and when I say brokerage, we're talking about loans from government to health boards of £500 million. It's a lot of money. And if that money was ever to be repaid, surely it could be reinvested back into the health service. But, you know, let's be honest, are you expecting any of that money ever to be repaid? I mean, which health board is in a financially astute position to be able to pay back loans?
So our financial assumptions going forward is not dependent on that funding being repaid. What we are, and I think what's really important for us to focus on is getting to the point where, and I'll ask Fiona to come in around that difference between brokerage and financial sustainability funding, but we've made the move away from brokerage. We now need to work with boards both at an individual board level, but also really importantly through our subnational planning arrangements to get to the place where we can step back from financial sustainability payments as well. Fiona.
Yeah, just to add to that, so as I say, I think brokerage worked quite differently pre-pandemic. We did see NHS Tayside and NHS 24 repay brokerage, so that was how the system was designed to work. I think after the pandemic, we saw more boards fall into financial difficulty, hence we recognised that system wasn't working as it should. And as you say, the 500 million outstanding is not a number we want to see continue to increase. I think it's important that that remains repayable in terms of that equity across the system. There are some boards, as noted, that have never required brokerage and don't have that outstanding balance. So from an audit perspective, from transparency in the annual accounts, I think it's important that figure continues to be recognised. But as noted, we've moved to a different system now of deficit support funding, with the main differences being that's not repayable. It's agreed with the board before financial plans are submitted, so as they know what they're working towards, and we give a 3-year trajectory of those figures, so as they can do that medium-term financial planning in a robust way, rather than waiting until sort of month 12 to know what their brokerage figure will be. So it's really proactively trying to manage their position.
Would it not be better just to say, like, we're going to write that off in the same way that many other government debts have been written off in recent years, where they have stepped in to support specific sectors, where there's just no expectation to get that money back. The money's gone. It's out of your balance sheet. It's been spent by the health board. Let's not pretend that you're going to get it back.
For transparency at the moment, I don't think that would be the right thing to do in terms of the readers of annual accounts and statements, and non-executive directors being able to hold boards to account. It did happen pre-pandemic in 2018, but at the moment we think it's important for transparency that that balance is held.
And the new model isn't a loan, it's just cash intervention. So how is it different, and is it more limited or limiting?
So it's different because it's non-repayable. It's different because it's agreed at the start of the financial year rather than the end of the financial year. And it's different because it's got a 3-year trajectory. So before, as I say, brokerage had only been known at month 12. Right. Now boards know their deficit support funding for 28-29 and can plan on that basis.
The problem with that, though, is if it's pre-agreed at the beginning of the year, it still leaves health boards short. So when we took evidence from, I'm just trying to find the quotation, from NHS Ayrshire and Arran, the other week, they made it clear that what they were expected to get in deficit support funding is still less than their deficit.
That's correct. So Ayrshire and Arran are the only board at the moment that cannot live within their deficit support funding, and it's 4.7 million, which is about 0.3% of their overall budget. Ayrshire and Arran haven't finished, of course, this financial year yet, so it's not to say they won't be able to meet the 25 million come sort of period 13 when that comes into play. And I would note that the total deficit support funding is 166 million for 25-26, and at month 10 our NHS Scotland deficit is 170 million, so that 4 million difference is only with Ayrshire and Arran.
So, okay, what happens when a board does not... this is a key point. What are the obligations on the health board to get the money? So you agree the figure at the beginning of the year. What do they have to do to qualify for the cash?
There isn't a qualification process. They will be allocated that up to that financial envelope. If they can deliver below that, which, for example, Grampian have, that's even better, but it's a maximum allowable deficit.
But they're not having to make non-recurring savings in year in order to get the cash?
No, we encourage boards, of course, strongly to make 3% recurrent savings, but they don't have to make that to get the cash, no.
Okay, that's helpful to know. Thank you. I mean, is there a wider issue here with the funding model? We did also hear in evidence from Ayrshire and Arran around how health boards are allocated their percentage of the pot. Now, it is a big pot of cash, I accept that. It's record levels of funding into health and social care. However, we're still in a position where waiting lists are long, and others will explore those, and all the operational issues that we all know about in the health service, despite that record funding. So, are you comfortable, and are we comfortable that the current model works, that the NRAC funding formula works, that it is proportionate and fair to health boards such as Ayrshire and Arran, who do have higher areas of deprivation, ageing demographics, and a reducing population, which actually negatively affects them on the NRAC funding?
So the NRAC formula is complex, and it does take into account a number of those factors in terms of, as you say, just population increases or decreases, but also the demographic within that population in terms of ageing, as well as things like rurality. So Arran, for example, having higher costs of travel for patients. We do review that annually, so it is updated annually. But it's something we'll continue to consider, and we do think about, for example, the operational improvement plan was funded in a slightly different way, because we do understand there will be variances and pressures at individual boards' areas, but also linked to that deficit support funding point, we have increased the amount that will be available to Ayrshire and Arran, for example, in 26-27 with their move to stage 4. So we've recognised the challenges that board is facing and increased their deficit support funding as a result.
I guess the premise of my question is it worth having a rethink of how we support boards, how they're funded? If so, if many of them can make ends meet and many of them can't, does that show a lack of governance arrangements within those boards? Is it just that they have specifically difficult areas to look after in terms of their patient care? Or is it that the model doesn't work for them and the nature of what they have to provide?
So I would say, changing the formula won't change the overall pot of money that's available. So I think it's important that wouldn't become, I don't want to say a distraction, but it's not going to change the overall picture for NHS Scotland. So back to that point about governance and understanding which boards are struggling the most would come through that support and intervention framework and the changes that we've seen at Grampian and Ayrshire.
All right. Ms Lamb, if the Scottish Fiscal Commission's forecasts are accurate and the level of spend on health and social care rises to 40% in the coming years and up to 55% down the line, which is not that far away, probably within the course of the next parliamentary cycle, it could be hitting 50% plus. That's half of all devolved spending. That surely is unsustainable.
So I would agree that our focus needs to be on how we ensure that we are not on that otherwise inevitable trajectory, and that's why the publication of the population health framework and the work to support the population health framework is so important. And again, and I think we touched on this a little bit last time I was here, that there is the contribution of the health and social care system into the health of the population, which is a really important one. But actually, as Michael Marmot would argue, that 80% of that contribution towards people having health issues or not is actually down to poverty, economy, housing, education, and a whole load of other factors. So I think the perspective from the perspective of this government, what's been really important is the focus on child poverty, particularly, and trying to ensure that young people are getting the best possible start in life, so that we as a country can start to move away from that cycle of deprivation, and deprivation leading to health inequalities.
But the problem with
that's
that
long term.
It is, but it's also chicken and egg. If half of your budget has been spent on treating people who are unhealthy, you have less money to spend on the preventative work, on making people's homes safe and warm, on education, on treating drugs and alcohol problems, on treating mental health, on treating homelessness, and so on. So there's actually less money to now go around every other portfolio when half of all government cash goes to yours. I
absolutely accept that, and that's why the other one of our reform frameworks, the service renewal framework, is so important, because that's about how we start to make the changes that we know we need to make to change in order to be able to live without our means and not need to. I sometimes describe the NHS as a repair shop, and we need to move away from being that repair shop towards much more of that preventative and proactive work. I think we can point to moves that we've already made. So in the operational performance improvement framework, there are a couple of innovative actions around treatment of stroke patients and the third of people who don't respond to the general drug prescribed, and the way in which we can use genome testing now to support people to be really clear that they're getting the right medicine for them that prevents them from having strokes, or in the case of young babies, prevents them from developing hearing issues. So there's lots that we can do in relatively simple ways, but also there is that big societal issue around how we address some of those underlying issues that absolutely drive health inequalities in our population.
Yeah, and my good friend Mr Simpson will be talking about technology. I'm sure
he will.
Plays a huge potential in healthcare. But just before I finish, I do have to ask about GP walk-in centres, because it's been in the news over the last few weeks since we last met here in this committee. I have no political view on them, but we have to note concerns that have been raised about them, and I want to ask you about those. The BMA Scotland and the RCGP have been, I would say, unusually critical of the plans. It's a lot of money. they claim that this was tried and tested in England and failed, and that no lessons will have been learnt from it. I can see the benefit of walk-in GP appointments or nurse appointments, absolutely, particularly till 8 o'clock for most working age population. That makes complete sense. But they have been heavily criticised by the very people who will be tasked to deliver those services. What do you say in response to them?
Yeah, so what I would say in response to that is, first of all, the GP walk-ins have been established very much as a pilot programme, so they have that evaluation wrapped around them from the very outset. They are very much about understanding the population that uses those walk-ins, the reasons why they're using them, and not just in terms of the convenience of them, but also what sort of health conditions they're presenting with as well. So it is very much a pilot programme, and it is designed to complement the investment that I've already talked about, that we're putting into general practice as well. I think one of the concerns that the BMA and the Royal College have had, and I've spoken at length with the Royal College about this, is around the potential loss of continuity of care and the value that continuity of care provides to patients. So as part of that evaluation, that's one of the things we will be looking at, about ensuring that when people attend those clinics, that the record of that interaction is available to their general practitioner as well. But I think we also have to accept that actually, I think, people are looking to be able to access those sort of services, as you say, through a longer period of time, and also in locations that are maybe more convenient to them because they're closer to where they work rather than maybe closer to where they live. So I think it is good to test that, but we're doing that with all of that evaluation wrapped around it.
Okay, I'll leave that there. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I'm now going to turn straight away to Joe Fitzpatrick, who's got some more questions for you. Joe.
So I guess the main question I was want to ask just now is, obviously, as you know, I sit on the Health and Sports Committee, and there's been a few times when Health and Sport Committee has found it difficult to obtain witnesses from health boards. And obviously, this is the Audit Committee, but Audit is for the whole Parliament. So, and it's not just the NHS. There's other committees have had challenges getting witnesses. So this isn't something specific, but you are here. So. Just to ask for some assurance that for the next Parliament that you can make sure that board chief executives and chairs understand the importance of engaging with the committees of the Parliament. And I think audit's good for everyone. I think scrutiny is good for everyone. So I think health boards engaging with the Health Committee is something we should be encouraging, because I think it helps overall. So just an assurance that we can...
Absolutely, and I would completely agree. I think it is really important that as public services we are able to engage with all the committees in the Parliament, and that we are accountable for the work that we're doing. I wasn't aware that the committee was having any issues with that, so that is something I'll take away and maybe pick up with the clerks of the committee. And because actually, if that is a feature, I mean, certainly we would want to sort that for the next Parliament, but I think if that was escalated to me in my office, then we can probably provide some help.
So I think there's maybe been a couple of times that more senior people have been invited to give evidence than should have really been, because the right people had not been available, and so it might save your time, for instance. And you're obviously really busy. So thanks very much for that, because I think that's for the Parliament going forward.
Definitely.
I think that was the main question I had just now. I might have some other stuff to later.
Okay, that's fine, Joe. In which case, I will invite Graham Simpson to put some questions to you. Graham.
Right. Thank you very much, Convener. I've got a few questions to cover. I think I'll start, though, with something that has just come out from the BMA. It's a press release, so you won't have seen it because it's just been issued. But they're talking about the number of consultant vacancies. They've done an FOI survey. They appear to do this every year. Their survey shows that there are over 1,000 consultancy vacancies, well, 1,100 in Scotland. That's whole-time equivalent. And yet they say that official figures show there are only 447. So there's a big discrepancy there. And they're arguing in this press release that, well, actually, based on those figures, and they are quite stark, it's little wonder that people are having to wait so long for health treatment. I mean, some of the figures that they've come up with, Lanarkshire, which is the board that, you know, I live in Lanarkshire, so that's my board, 180 consultant vacancies, Lothian 144, Dumfries and Galloway 119. They say that the vacancies have gone up since they last did this survey. I mean, it's concerning, isn't it? That those levels are really worrying. So based on the official figures, now, according to them, 447, the figures they've uncovered in their FOI 1100 across Scotland. So which is right? I know you haven't seen it.
I'm sure you'll agree you are slightly springing this one on us. The data that I have in front of me in relation to consultant vacancies, which is expressed in percentages, would indicate that the vacancy rate for 2024, which seems to be the latest figure I have, was 6.2%, and that compares to 6.4% in 2015. So I think probably what we need to do is to go away and have a look at where the BMA are sourcing their data, and I will do my best to respond to the committee.
They're saying it's 14.4%.
Right,
so
okay.
It's quite a difference.
That's quite a difference, yes.
It's a big difference. So this is based on FOIs. Over 1,000 posts are unfilled. So I accept your figures are different, but their FOIs are their FOIs. So somewhere there is a difference. So it may be the way you collate your figures. Maybe that should be reviewed, because we need to know the actual, the true state, the true picture.
NHS Education for Scotland are responsible for collating workforce statistics, but they are subject to the normal checks and balance for any published statistics. So I think we would need to look at where the BMA have drawn their detail from, but I'm very happy to come back to the committee on that one.
So the chair of the BMA, Dr. Joanna Bredsky, says, we've consistently warned of the urgent need to deliver a comprehensive and forward-thinking workforce plan for the NHS, which looks at level of patient need and the doctors required for the future, which you presumably agree with. But she also says that given this level of vacancies, you know, it's little wonder that waiting lists are what they are, and it's also little wonder that people turn to private healthcare.
Could I just clarify, is that a BMA, a UK BMA or BMA Scotland report?
This is from BMA Scotland.
Right, okay.
BMA Scotland, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
It's just out this morning, so I appreciate you've not seen it, but I think it raises issues which relate very much to what the Auditor General's written about. And I was struck when I was reading that quote. There was a report out this week, which you may have seen, from the Private Healthcare Information Network, which says that private hospital admissions in Scotland are now hitting record levels. People are increasingly turning to paying for their own treatment, with cataracts the most common reason for admissions. That's up by 5%, and then it's hip replacements and upper gastrointestinal endoscopy. So people, in fact, interestingly, there are more consultants active in private practice in Scotland than ever before. So while we've got all these vacancies in the NHS, consultants are increasingly turning to work in private practice. I mean, it's not right, is it?
So I think the report that you refer to, again, I think that came out yesterday, I think. So we are looking at that at the moment and trying to understand the data that's in it. However, I would point you to my opening remarks about the increase in the levels of activity that we've seen across NHS Scotland, and I'm sure Christine will be happy to provide you with more details around the impact that that's had on our waiting lists.
But I'm sure we've raised this before, the number of people turning to private healthcare. I've not done it myself, but I know people who have. And these are not wealthy people, so they're really dipping into their savings, spending thousands of pounds on things that really ought to be provided through the NHS. So
and that is absolutely why we've been so focused on the Operational Performance Improvement Plan and on ensuring that we are using all the capacity that we have in Scotland in the best way possible. And I know Christine can say more about how we've been working on boards supporting each other. So because I think one of the issues has been about there being much longer waits in some board areas than in other board areas, and the work that we've been doing through collaboration, but increasingly now moving into subnational planning, is about addressing that.
Yes. I think just on your example of cataracts, I mean, clearly that's why we're all focused on reducing those longest waits. But the National Treatment Centres, where a lot of the high volume cataract surgery is done now, with 30,000 appointments this year, exceeding 30,000 by the end of the year, going through National Treatment Centres. So that's where the answer really lies in what you're saying. Yes, there will always be a level of private market in Scotland. As you'll know, it's relatively small compared to England, for example, but we our aim is to get to a position where when people are looking at choice, where the wait times within the NHS is one that will support people remaining on a waiting list and being seen and treated within the time frame that we've set as our targets in the future, and that's what the plan is really focused on.
yeah, I don't know if it's relatively small or not, but what is clear is that an increasing number of people are turning to private healthcare, really out of desperation, because they feel they're not getting the treatment that they need through the NHS. That's just the reality.
And we're checking the data is an independent report, so there will be a range of different types of services in there that are private. But you're right, cataracts is one of those areas of growth. We're aware of that. But the National Treatment Centres is our sustainable model for that going forward.
Okay, we've spoken before about the National Review of Procedures and looking at things that may be of limited clinical value, that's procedures and indeed medicines. So this is really about doing things better, not doing things that you don't need to do. And in our evidence session with Ayrshire and Arran and Grampian, they were saying that they've submitted some thoughts on this, presumably to you. So where are we with the national review? I mean, are we in a position to, have made some decisions?
Yeah, so the National Referral Protocol was issued by the Chief Medical Officer in September, at the end of September last year. And that was accompanied by evidence reviews covering a range of procedures. And just to be clear, that this is not about rationing or restricting access to procedures for people who need them. It is very much about being really clear about the clinical criteria for people requiring those procedures and ensuring that, again, it's making sure that people aren't getting procedures that are not necessarily going to be helpful or which or that are not clinically required. The protocol required boards to set up vetting panels to monitor adherence and to be able to consider appeals against decisions made about access to those procedures. And we recently wrote out to boards to ask for confirmation that those processes were in place. So I suspect that's where that feedback loop, so that was, I think we got that, we asked for that information at the beginning of February. I think we've had responses from all but 2 boards, and they're being chased up at the moment. So that's with a view to establishing that boards have put those processes in place so they can make sure that the evidence and the clinical guidelines are being followed, but also to identify and highlight any issues that are emerging as a result.
So do we now have a list of procedures that we're doing, either not doing or
so
doing less of?
there is a list of procedures. It's actually all online, so you can
Right.
go into the guidance and it gives you a list of all the procedures, and then you can actually it's probably more difficult to understand than the PFI contract for the ERI, but you can, if you're not a clinician, but if you go into the individual evidence summaries, you can see some of the presenting issues that would mean that maybe somebody should be treated, as opposed to maybe when they shouldn't be treated.
Where would we find that information?
So if I looked at this last night, so if you Google National Referral Protocol Scotland, you can, within that, then you can click on the different procedures. And to give you an example, it's things like tattoo removal, varicose vein surgery, aesthetic facial surgery. So there will be circumstances in which all those procedures are absolutely appropriate, but equally we just need to be assured that those are the circumstances in which they're being provided.
Okay, you told us about varicose veins previously, so we'll add to that tattoo removal. Okay, and what about medicines? You know, because the Auditor General's report shows that the cost of prescribing is going up year on year. So at some point we need to get a grip of that. And I know you've been looking at that. So what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so the whole point around medicine prescribing practices, but also medicines of lower clinical value, they're picked up on the 15-box grid that I referred to earlier. So Fiona can maybe say a bit more about what that covers and the support that we provide on that as well.
Yeah, just on that medicines point, so there's around 30 million spend nationally on medicines of lower limited clinical value. So similarly, there's a published list available on the internet to sort of set out what those medicines look like. Again, it might be cases where those medicines should be prescribed, but in many cases they're shown to have limited clinical effectiveness for that patient. So that's a way, I guess, that we can potentially drive savings out the system in terms of not prescribing those medicines that are not driving the outcomes that we would look for. Just on that medicines point, there are of course other things that we look at, such as switching to biosimilar medications where it's clinically safe to do so, as well as looking at things like polypharmacy reviews where people are on 8+ medications and that might not be, again, the best sort of treatment for them. So there's numerous sort of initiatives we're looking at to try and manage that prescribing spend.
So if you've got a list of medicines that are of lower clinical value, are you actually, stopping prescribing any of these?
No, they won't be removed from the list as such, unless there's evidence to say it's actually clinically harmful, but similar to the procedures, they would only be prescribed in specific circumstances, but in the main they've shown not to be as clinically effective as other medicines.
Have you ever looked at things that are prescribed that you could easily buy over the counter for possibly less money than it would cost the NHS?
Yeah, so I think, Pharmacy First is a good example of a way that we're looking at prescribing in different ways, so where people do need medication, but as it's noted, our policy is that we don't charge for prescriptions and medicine is available at the point of need for everyone.
If I go into a pharmacy and the pharmacist prescribes me something, so I haven't been to the GP, I've been into the pharmacy, what does the pharmacy get paid?
So there is a tariff system for different medicines, so it varies by medicine across the country. It's quite a complex sort of rebate system for pharmacy payments.
Well, let me just give you a personal example. I had an allergic reaction to something quite recently. I came over in a rash and it was quite itchy. I was over in Edinburgh, so I wasn't at home. So I went into a pharmacy and they were really very good, gave me some antihistamines and some cream to deal with the itch. But that was stuff I could have bought myself and I actually wanted to pay for it. But it was given to me for nothing. I've never used the cream. And it just struck me that well, there is an example. I didn't go in to get free stuff. I just wanted some assistance. But I was given it for free, and I just thought, well, what's the pharmacy making out of this? Would they have earned less if I'd bought it? I suppose is my point.
So that shouldn't be driving prescribing behaviour in pharmacies in terms of the way those sort of rebates and costs are set up. And of course, I suppose we're not means testing that. So, I suppose your ability to pay is not something the pharmacy would have sort of privy to information of. No. So I think it is really important that people do get the medicines that they need. But of course, we would encourage people where possible, if they can buy things over the counter, that's an option. But I think it's important that we don't discriminate or not allow people the treatment that they need because
I get it's a difficult area, but if you've got someone like me, and I won't be unique in just going in somewhere and think, I just want to buy some stuff, just tell me what to buy. And yet I'm giving it for nothing, so it's cost the taxpayer money that the taxpayer didn't need to spend. I just wonder whether you've ever looked at that.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of wider thinking, I guess, around that model of prescribing in terms of pharmacy first and how some of those initiatives work. But I suppose back to the point, again, I think it's important that people can access those medicines when they need to.
Before I move on, is it okay? I think Joe Fitzpatrick wants to ask something on this.
Yeah, go on, Joe.
On this area, because I think I understand where Graham's coming from, but I wonder if you're able to just outline how much pressure potentially people going to the pharmacy rather than going to their GP. So obviously Graham wasn't overly concerned about his allergic reaction, but other folk might be, and their first instinct might be to go to the GP. My assumption is that going to the GP will be far more expensive to the system overall, putting on pressure, stopping somebody else getting an appointment. So just have we looked at the savings from the pharmacy first?
Yeah, so I think that's a really important point about the value of the pharmacy first approach, in that it is absolutely about, again, it's about making sure that people can get access to the care and advice that they need in the community, but also recognising that pharmacists are very skilled in terms of understanding the nature of medicines that will help people. And actually, if we can deal with people through pharmacies rather than, as you say, presenting at general practice, then it frees up more appointments in general practice for people who genuinely require that sort of input. So that's why Pharmacy First has become such an important aspect of that overall package of services. I don't in front of me have the information around volumes of activity in Pharmacy First, but we can provide that to the committee.
Thank you.
Yeah, it would be interesting to know, actually.
Sure. So
if you can get that for us. Can I ask you about, there's something that I raised with the Health Secretary in the Chamber. It's around about preventative health, and I was raising the issue of screening for certain types of cancers, so lung cancer. There is a system in a lot of England, maybe all of England, where people who are deemed to be at risk of lung cancer, so anyone who's ever smoked over a certain age, could be called in and given a routine screening. And I actually know someone in this position who lives just over the border, actually. So called in, given this screening, and in this case, cancer was picked up. So that individual is now waiting for an operation. Had that not happened, they may not have found out they had cancer until it was too late. Now, which will obviously terrible for the individual, but also not good for the NHS, because if we're picking things up earlier, it's obviously better and it's cheaper. And yet we don't have this national system here. And I know the Health Secretary said, well, we're looking at it, but it seems to me that ought to be a priority.
Yeah, so I think certainly in Scotland, the approach that we take to all the conditions that we screen for would be to look at that on a national basis. So I do not have in front of me any of the details in relation to exactly where we are with lung cancer screening, but again, we can come back to you on that. I think it's also just worth actually as well acknowledging the success and the impact of our rapid cancer diagnosis service and the way in which that has been acting now, accepting that that's for people people who maybe have undifferentiated symptoms. But Christine,
yeah, I think I know that I think all nations in the UK are working through the evaluation and implementation on lung screening. So we've got 6 rapid cancer diagnostic services, which is to pick up, as Caroline says, cancers that would just maybe present with some symptoms but don't have a clear pathway through. And the evaluation of those 6 has been positive. The median referral time is 15 days to diagnosis. So whilst dedicated lung screening programmes is one way through that, having people having a way in that cuts out that important time at the beginning, as you say, is really important. So, and we've also got developments as well as the rapid diagnostic centres of having a single point of contact within diagnostic services for those types of areas. So, key thing really there is be able to get faster time through to the diagnostics and then referral as part of our overall cancer pathway. So I think it is an important point you say, but being able to capture people through the overall pathway, because not every lung cancer being one example, but you know how we capture all the other cancers is equally important. So that again, the learning from those centres and then understanding the extent to which there's further opportunities to roll out those services across the country is part of our cancer improvement plan.
Well, I mean, in terms of learning, you just need to, go to Carlisle, and you'll see. Well, please do, because you'll see a very, very good service in operation, which I think we could be using here.
Yeah, no, I think we're as part of our cancer improvement plan, we are looking at a whole range of areas. I think if we can write to you and just give a bit more detail, and specifically on the lung screening programme, as you say.
Okay, so you've discovered that I like to be bang up to date, and I was reading the recent report from the Tony Blair Institute. I don't know if you saw that. You've not read it? You should read it. Now, I'm not a big Tony Blair fan, but his institute, I'm afraid, the NHS in Scotland has come onto their radar, and they've produced a report called From Ambition to Delivery, How the Next Scottish Government Can Transform Health. I do recommend it. It's quite detailed. It has some good recommendations. So I won't go through all of it. But funnily enough, they mention my favourite thing, the app.
Yep.
Or the lack of an app. And interestingly, they tell us that Denmark has a single national digital platform. Every citizen can access their medical record, test results, prescriptions, referrals and vaccination history. They can book appointments and communicate with clinicians. The system connects general practice, hospitals and other local services. Finland, more than 5 million people have access to digital care pathways. And as I pointed out before, down in England, again, go to Carlisle if you want. They've got the app. They've had the app since 2018, and it's been downloaded by 3/4 of adults. That's really high. More than 5 million prescriptions a month are ordered through the English app. It provides users with access to their GP health records. You can book appointments and you can communicate with healthcare providers. So far in Scotland, all we have is a limited trial in Lanarkshire, and it's only for dermatology patients. So come on, when are we going to get this national app?
Right, so as you acknowledged, that we have been trialling it in Lanarkshire. That is going well. I'll ask Christine to talk about the plans for rollout.
And I have read the Tony Blair Institute report, because we need to, we all need to learn from what's happening in other nations. So focusing on where we are today, can't go back the way. But I guess the point I would make though is that as my technology team tell me, an app isn't everything. And we do have mechanisms to do a lot of those things, but they're not single national systems, which is the aspiration. You know, the system in Denmark, as you say, is a kind of internationally recognised best practice that nations are looking to move to. So, as you say, trial in Lanarkshire was successful, I'm glad to say, and it gives us a foundation on which to build. So, but the success comes from the systems and their ability to interface into that digital front door. So the fact that we have that emergency care summary is what makes that ability for us to move now to national rollout, which is on target for April this year for population level access to a limited amount of information, which is about people being able to access their personal information, and from that emergency care summary and service access finder. So, and you know, Mr Simpson, based on experience in England, that it's a rollout that started off with limited data and then it has built from there. So people being able to have web-based access from April is the kind of minimum first step, and also be able to have access through downloadable app, which will then allow us to start to build other services from there across the country and get to that point, as you say, where it's a fully integrated digital front door across health and care. You'll know that the work in England is focused on the NHS. Our focus is health and care, so people will be able to get their what matters to me information through social care as part of that development. And yes, having access to screening and vaccinations and self-management is all part of a plan, but we do need to build that up. I don't think that we'll find many nations that had a kind of go live with everything on the same day. We do need to build it in a way that we know is going to work, that the data that people can access is clinically safe, and we know it's the right data. And so that's the approach in April, is to make sure that we can access the data from our core systems and then build a rollout plan from there.
So from April, we're going to have something that's very, very limited, nothing like the all singing, all dancing systems that they have in England and Denmark and Finland. And, you know, I just, as a patient, this is something I want to see, because you need to make it easier for people to access the health service. And that's what this is about.
Yep, and that's what our digital front door. I don't think anyone's going to disagree with you on that, but you will know that at the moment people have, and it's variable across the country, but people can book appointments with GPs, order repeat prescriptions. So, you know, there are mechanisms to do it. It's not a single national system, so it's not that we have absolutely nothing, but it is our ambition to move, as you've outlined and is in the report. That is our ambition for Scotland too.
The question is when.
So
when?
April is
no, not April.
That's
a very limited thing.
Yep.
That's not what I'm talking about.
And then we'll have a rollout that will be agreed with the system and with users about the right level of prioritisation as we roll that forward. But you'll know from the dermatology example that in Lanarkshire that has two-way booking as part of that, which is going to be important to some people, but not everyone is using hospital services all the time. For some people, the preventative side and self-management is going to be more important. So working through that rollout plan is where we go next after the population level rollout.
Right, I don't know what the problem is here. I don't know where the sticking point is. It's quite obvious what needs to happen, and it needs to happen at pace, and it's not happening at pace. It's just a frustration.
Okay.
I'll leave it.
Your frustration, Mr Simpson. Can I just follow up a little bit on Graham Simpson's line of questioning, just because you've mentioned Lanarkshire and we've been talking about prescription drugs. There's a shortage of cocodamol, isn't there, at the moment, I think? And people are unable to get it prescribed through the GPs. Certainly people in Lanarkshire have been coming to me to say that. Do you know what the latest position is and how long this is likely to last and what the alternative solutions are?
I'm sorry, I don't have an up-to-date position on that, but I will get back to you on that one.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Unless any of my,
No, right, okay.
Yeah, no.
Jamie Green has got a final question.
Yeah, and just for Mr Simpson's point, this is about technology. It's really important. I was on a waiting list for 18 months for elective surgery. I then got a letter at short notice, which is great because of this new initiative of sending people to other health boards at the weekend, which is really a great way of getting through the backlog. I'm sure it's costing you an absolute fortune to do it because you're having to pay consultants overtime to work on a Sunday, but nonetheless, grateful for it. But the problem is it was a letter, and I don't know when the last time you got a letter through the post from Royal Mail on time. So I missed it, back on a waiting list, after a year and a half, whilst the condition gets worse. So that's how important we get this right, is no app, no portal, no email, no text message, nothing, just a letter in the post, if they had the right address on the system. Thankfully they did.
So I'm really sorry that happened to you, and I absolutely accept that that rapidity of communications is one of the many reasons why we are also keen to progress this at pace. I think I would also say that we also recognise, and Audit Scotland I think have been really clear to point out to us that we need to maintain other channels as well, so that people who do not want to use digital means or are digitally excluded are also able to access services as well.
I know, but I'm just saying, send people a text message.
Absolutely.
It's not difficult. That doesn't require a lot of capital investment in infrastructure. It just needs a little bit of joining up how you inform people about things like appointments. Luckily, and I'm pleased to say I was able to get a last-minute cancellation the following week, having spoken to them. But yeah, how many other people out there are waiting on those letters? So I did have one proper final question about the national treatment centres, because we've spoken a lot about reform, about new ways of doing things, which is innovative and trying to get through these backlogs. However, the NHS capital budget has been cut by 22% over the last 5 years, and my understanding is around 5 of these national treatment centres are currently on pause. The Royal College of Surgeons think basically at least 4 of them have just been canned completely and are never going to happen. We talked a little bit about Ayrshire and Arran, some of the problems they're having. They're one of those national treatment centres that's been paused. I mean, that doesn't make sense.
So, yes, you're correctly set out the situation is that we, due to those capital constraints, we paused the National Treatment Centre programme. However, that doesn't mean that we haven't been doing anything. So what we have been focused on is maximising the use of our existing national treatment centres, but also looking at areas within our existing estate that weren't badged as national treatment centres, but where we have had theatres that we can bring into use, and we've done that. So in the Queen Margaret Hospital in Dunfermline, in Gartnavel, in a number of other areas, we have been bringing into use additional capacity within our existing estate. And I think going forward, our focus will remain on what more can we do within our existing estate, because we can do that much more quickly and at lower cost as well.
Yeah, I imagine those NTCs would, in terms of capital projects, were quite expensive to build, but that's new build and they're going to take time, and we know that everything costs more and takes forever. So yes, if there is capacity in the existing estate to get through the backlog, then that would be a priority. I understand that. Okay, thanks.
I've had an indication that Joe Fitzpatrick is going to try our patience and ask a final question.
Very quickly, I get more for information. Graham's question earlier about the national referral protocol. I didn't do a Google search. I did a DuckDuckGo search, and it is there. So all the conditions are listed there, and there's an app.
We have a number of apps.
Well, on that note of harmony, I think I will bring this morning's session to a close. Can I thank Caroline Lamb, you for your evidence this morning, Christine McLaughlin, Fiona Bennett. I know there are some things that you're going to get back to us on with a bit more information. As this is our last session together and you've been one of our most regular witnesses, Caroline, I'm reminded of Nye Bevan in 1948 saying that as the Health Secretary he'd be responsible for every single dropped bedpan. And there are times I should think you felt as though you've been held responsible for that level of detail, and we've even got to tattoo removal this morning. So can I thank you very much for your cooperation with this committee. To reflect the point that Joe Fitzpatrick was making earlier, we really do appreciate the fact that you've been willing to sit before us, answer our questions, respond to requests for further information in order to try to help us scrutinise what we've reminded everybody of, a huge part of public expenditure in Scotland, and a treasured institution as well, which is the National Health Service. So can I thank you very much indeed, and as previously agreed to by the committee, I will move us into private session. Thank you.